Now, you don't need me to tell you it's Friday, which means the weekend sort of starts here for some of us. It certainly does for me, because I'm considering what might I be watching on the small screen when the football's not on. Well, I'll tell you what, I need the recommendations of our main movie man each and every Friday with small screen, big screen recommendations. It's Van Connor, top film critic, previewer and broadcaster. Good morning, Van.
And a good morning to you as well, Mr. Ross.
And you're kicking us off with a belter, a kind of reinvention almost of the old Hammer horror films with Ken Branagh at the helm.
Indeed, and this was that great point in the early 90s when, for some reason, the film industry decided as a sort of weird little trend that they would try and revive. It didn't really go anywhere, but they would try and take old 1930s, Universal classic monsters seriously, and we wound up with Bram Stoker's Dracula, we wound up with Jack Nicholson doing the Wolfman, and of course we got Ken Branagh doing Frankenstein in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
And it's the Horror Channel, which is a Freeview channel, of course, as are all our recommendations. It's 9 o'clock tonight. What have you got for us? What have you dug out?
So it's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It stars Ken Branagh as Victor Frankenstein. It stars Robert De Niro as the monster.
Yeah.
And as the great love of Victor's life, we have none other than, of course, that stalwart of Ken Branagh Productions for a long, long time, Miss Helena Bonham Carter. I've got a clip for you of Victor confessing his sins, as it were.
Here we go.
I have done something so terrible, so evil, and I'm frightened. If I tell you the truth, that I will lose you.
You'll lose me if you don't.
Of course, Sir Ken plays Victor Frankenstein. You mentioned Robert De Niro's in this. Richard Bryars, of course, the Good Life man, is in this. And I interviewed him once and asked him about this, and he was fantastic because he said, well, Paul, he said, no, it was very difficult for me, he said, because De Niro's a method actor, and Richard Bryars plays the blind hermit. So he said, I was in the cabin, and I had my back to him, and I was saying to dear old Ken, when's he going to come in? And he said, well, when Robert feels it's right to come in, but I need a cue. When's he going to come in? And it was like when two worlds collided in the acting world. So De Niro and Richard Bryars on screen together for the only time. That's 9 o'clock tonight. I've got an absolute belter, though. This is one of the few films, folks, if you ever look at movie rating systems like IMDb, there's one called Rotten Tomatoes. This film is one of the few that gets 100% positive review on Rotten Tomatoes. It's an Ealing masterpiece. It's on later on this morning. It's on 11 o'clock this morning on Film 4. It is, I think, the greatest Ealing comedy, an absolute belter. It's the Ladykillers. Let's have the trailer.
Ealing Studios, inspired creators of the fabulous Lavender Hill Mob, now joyfully embark upon the crest of yet another crime wave. Using this sweetly innocent old lady as a bewildered, unsuspecting decoy, the hilariously infamous Alec Guinness prepares a masterstroke of villainy that only he could conjure up and carry through with such demoniacal glee. No plot was ever hatched with such satanic cunning as Guinness and his genial group of merry minstrels hit every high note in this delightfully different entertainment. True artists, every one of them.
So Alec Guinness, Peter Sellers, Herbert Long is fantastic in this, and it was written by a man, I don't know if you know, he's called William Rose. He was Oscar nominated for the screenplay, won a BAFTA for it, and he said the whole story came to him in a dream. He said, I just had to write it down. It's such a great film, this, isn't it?
It really is. It's an absolute classic. It's one of those that you can revisit time and time again, and it's still exactly as wonderful as the first time you saw it. It's one of those great timeless comedies. I mean, it's worth noting as well, this got remade, was it about a half century later? With
Tom Hanks, was it? Tom Hanks was in it, set in the Deep South or something, I think, wasn't it?
It was, and it was the Coen brothers writing and directing, and it was terrible.
Yeah.
So it goes to show you that sometimes we do beat even the Coen brothers at these things.
Okay, now from the Ladykillers, which is a lovely kind of 1950, I think it's a 1955 Ealing comedy, you're going way back into the West. For tomorrow, we've both picked a Western. You've picked a bone chiller. It's Bone Tomahawk.
Bone Tomahawk is a film that made me fall in love with writer-director S. Craig Zahler, who after this would go on to make Brawl in Cell Block 99 with Vince Vaughn.
Yeah.
And then he would make a movie, I think it was last year maybe, with Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn again, called Dragged Across Concrete. Now, Dragged Across Concrete wasn't very good. Brawl in Cell Block 9 was very good. Brawl in Cell Block 99, sorry, was very good. Bone Tomahawk, though, is his absolute masterpiece. I would describe it as the From Dusk Till Dawn of Westerns, but maybe not quite as wild, although it's absolutely
it's kind of the Western version of Hills Have Eyes, isn't it, as well?
It absolutely is. So, it's the basic sort of premise for an old-style gather-a-posse Western. Western. It's a young woman, one of the wives gets taken by savages from the town, and it's left to the sheriff and her husband to wrangle up a posse and go and find her. But of course, there's got to be more to it than that. And, you know, the sheriff being Kurt Russell, that's more than you need. Yep. I've got a clip for you of Kurt Russell assembling that posse.
This empty area is a mountain range. Forbidden territory has been for centuries. Somewhere in the northwestern part of it is a place my people call the Valley of the Starving Men. Troglodytes are said to live there.
That's days from here.
How many of them do you think there are? It won't matter. You have no chance against any number of them. I'm riding out with Mr. O'Dwyer because there isn't a choice for either of us. The rest of you can stay.
You'll be killed.
I mean, we should perhaps alert people to the fact this is a very grisly film, is it not? Because it's more than your average Western on Film 4. It's 9 o'clock tomorrow night. Great film.
It really is. It's a Western that I would say delves very strictly into the horror genre at different points as well. Definitely.
Yeah. I'd urge you to have your Saturday tea or your takeaway before you watch this one. It's because it might put you off meat for a while, mightn't it? It's one of those films.
Most definitely.
Now, as you know, I love Westerns. They're my favourite genre. I love horror films as well. So Bone Tomahawk kind of ticks both boxes. But up against it, or earlier in fact, you've got Film 4, 11 tomorrow night, Bone Tomahawk. I've got Paramount, again Freeview, 6:15 it is tomorrow, I think. It's Open Range. Kevin Costner stars in it. He directed it as well. It's a brilliant film written by a man called Craig Storper, who really knows his Westerns. An amazing cast. Michael Gambon's in it, Robert Duvall's in it, Annette Bening's in it as the love interest, of course. And it's a proper elegiac, almost old-fashioned Western with a bit of a twist, because Kevin Costner's character, who's been working with Robert Duvall for a while, but has come back from the American Civil War with what we'd now call PTSD. He's done terrible things. He's a man with a haunted past. He's a man with a terrifyingly violent past. It is a great film, this. It's a proper, almost biblical Western. Let's have the trailer.
Beautiful country. Man can get lost out here. Forget there's people and things that ain't so simple as this. How long we been riding together, Charlie?
Nigh on 10 years.
Mm-hmm. You know what they call that? Call it a decade.
I always hoped somebody gentle and caring might come along.
I'm not who you think I am, Sue.
My name's Denton Baxter. You know, folks around these parts don't take to free grazers.
Always been country plenty for man and beast.
Times change, Mr. Spearman.
A man's got a right to protect his property and his life, and we ain't letting no rancher or his lawman take either.
Men are gonna get killed here today, Sue. And I'm gonna kill them.
You should have run when you had the chance, Spearman.
You're the one who killed our friend?
That's right.
I tell you what, Kevin Costner was interviewed about this film. I wish I'd interviewed him about it. And he said, because it followed the Matrix revolution, the Wachowskis, kind of that, bullet time. He said, I wanted to show a gunfight the way it was, it happening that quickly, over in a matter of minutes. And it is the end shootout for this, and this is from somebody who loves Sam Peckinpah. It's one of the best shootouts on Western history. I think it's a fantastic film, this. And the dialogue, there's a line there, men are going to get killed here today, I'm going to kill them. There's an even better line. He says, there's things that gnaw at a man worse than dying. And that's one of the great lines from a Western, isn't it?
I thought this was a tremendous film when it came out. And the weird part is, I think because it's nearly a decade after Unforgiven. Yeah. And I associate the two so closely in my head because they've got such a thematic and tonal sort of similarity between them that when you said to me you were going to do Open Range for this, I thought, oh, the Clint Eastwood one. I'd almost forgotten that it was Costner. Yeah. They're sort of so aligned in that way.
Well, it made money. I think it tripled its budget, and Robert Duvall's always, Oscar winner Robert Duvall, of course, always a fantastic. Yes. So 2 great Westerns for you for tomorrow. I'll kick off on Sunday because my film's earlier than yours, but it is a wonderful movie. In fact, I think they're both the same time. They're both 10 to 3. Mine's on Sony Classics. It was the third Road to movie, so it's Bing Crosby, it's Bob Hope, it is, of course, Dorothy Lamour. I absolutely love this film. It goes all the way back to 1942. It's called Road to Morocco. None of it, of course, was filmed anywhere near North Africa. It's all on the studio backlot, but it's a bonkers, mad, dopey film, a brilliant laugh-a-line film. I absolutely love it. Let's remind you of how the film starts. There's Bing and there's Bob as a couple of ne'er-do-well American con-men drifters, and on the back of what is quite obviously not a real camel, singing about the road to Morocco. I love that line. It's Johnny Burke and Jimmy Van Heusen song, like Webster's Dictionary, we're Morocco bound, as in Morocco leather. And it's one of those films where, I mean, there's a moment in this film when a camel looks straight at the camera and says, the camel says, this is the screw spookiest movie I've ever been in. It's a complete spoof, but I love the Road to films. Are you a fan, Van?
I am. Do you know, I wasn't familiar with them until sort of around the time of the millennium when Family Guy became a thing. And Family Guy did this gimmick where every couple of years they would do a Road to episode with Brian and Stewie that would deliberately sort of ape and satirise the conventions of the Bob Hope, Bing Crosby Road to movies. And so that got me into them from there. And I will be honest, I do think this is the better of the three.
It is a great film. A Road to Utopia, the one that followed it, set in Alaska, is also great. The next one along. They went on a bit too long with it. They finally did what I think, it's called Road to Hong Kong or something, when they were both a bit too old to do it. But they're great soundtrack, great songs in it as well. So that's my Sunday recommendation. You've gone for something, again, Sunday afternoon, 2:50 on Film 4. Something rather different, though. Tell us about Rise of the Guardians. I've not seen this film.
I've discovered this week that not a lot of people have. However, this came up in conversation with a mutual friend of ours, Mr. Johnny Hearn, earlier this week when we were talking about films we watch over Christmas every year.
Oh, right.
And he said he and his daughter watch Rise of the Guardians. His
favourite films normally involve blind Swedish shoemakers, though, with subtitles, shot in black and white.
Exactly. They're usually in black and white. Someone smokes a cigarette, announces they want a divorce, goes on a holiday. Yeah. Usually those are his films, but this one surprised me. And I'm going to play him this back. So, Rise of the Guardians is an animated film produced by Guillermo del Toro. I believe he has a hand in the story credits as well, and it's directed by Peter Ramsey, who went on to become one of the 3 directors of Into the Spider-Verse 2 years ago, and we did Oscar night together, so you know what a big Into the Spider-Verse fan I am. This is basically an animated Avengers-like story. It was released in 2011-2012 in 3D, and it pairs up the likes of Santa Claus, who in this version is Russian and voiced by Alec Baldwin.
Okay.
The Easter Bunny, who is a violent psychopath voiced by Hugh Jackman.
Okay.
The Tooth Fairy, the Sandman, and Jack Frost, who's voiced by Chris Pine, and is how they have to take on the Boogeyman as voiced by Jude Law. So there's a lot of pedigree behind it. I've got a clip for you of Chris Pine's Jack Frost getting inducted into his own personal Avengers initiative.
Sounds bonkers, but brilliant. Let's have a listen.
I'm not a Guardian.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said.
Jack, I don't think you understand what it is we do. Each of those lights is a child.
A child who believes. And good or bad, naughty or nice, we protect them. Tooth. Fingers out of mouth.
Oh, sorry. They're beautiful.
Okay, no more wishy-washy bitches out there doing who knows what.
You mean the Boogeyman?
Yes.
It sounds like it's got elements of Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas.
That's the thing. It does have a lot of that sort of Tim Burton animated style in it, but with this, that same way that Del Toro has kind of done the same thing, but taken it into infinitely creepier terrain. He's done the same here in animated form, while still keeping it a little bit more traditionally colourful, I would say, is the best way to describe it. The characterization in this is actually really sharp. I'm on record to say, I think I said when the film came out, like 9 years ago, that if they'd done this in live action, it would have been one for the ages. As it is in animated form, I still think it is absolutely superb, and something, if you get the chance to see, absolutely should.
I'm going to make sure I do set record, if nothing else. Van, always an absolute pleasure. Can we do it all again next week?
Absolutely. Till next week, sir.
Brilliant stuff. Van Connor there, our main movie previewer and reviewer. And remind people, Van, where they can find your work with Rebecca Perfect, the perfect companion. Are you in animated form as well at the moment?
I am indeed. We're having to take a couple of weeks off here and there because it's Oscar season, so they don't tend to put out the kind of films that lend themselves to cartoon heads. But when there's the occasional blockbuster, you can find me on YouTube on Fridays on Me Movies, and with Miss Perfect, and she really is the perfect co-host. You can find me on podcast platforms every Friday with the Ultimate 7-Day Movie Guide on the Off-Screen Show.
Brilliant stuff. Van Connor there talking to me, Paul Ross on talkSPORT. Extra time, and that